Hello everyone, welcome back to the copywriting series by Rabbit Hire. I am Sibit Clay and today we're going to be moving on to the 8th lecture of this 10 lecture series. So in today's lecture we're going to be talking about the psychology behind copywriting, how to understand what to write and how to understand your audience and use their psychology, their human tactics to write a copy catering to them. So before I move ahead, I'd like to remind you that this course comes with an ISO certification and you've got to be submitting your assignments before the given deadline in order to receive that certification. We're almost through with these series, so you shouldn't be slacking off at this point and losing the chance to attain a good, credible certification. Also, if you've got any issues, you can email us at support@rabbithire.com. And with that, let's get started on understanding what psychology is in copywriting and most importantly, why psychology matters in copywriting. Now, let's really sit with this idea for a second because the core truth is that this is what separates a really good copy from a forgettable one. Sometimes you could be writing something that's very witty. You've written a very good liner or you've used really good graphics, right? And that looks really good in terms of visuals and all of the copy that you've written. But at times, it still ends up being forgotten by your audience or it doesn't end up doing its work that well. Maybe it initially converted people, it converted leads into customers, but later on people kind of forgot about it. It didn't leave much of an impact. That is because you did not use psychology into your copywriting, right? So you've got to keep in mind that people do not buy products, they buy feelings, identities, outcomes. And this is something that we as copywriters need to internalize completely. No one buys a luxury watch just to show the time, or no one buys a skincare serum for the ingredient list. They buy these things because of the way it makes them feel, because it says stuff about who they are, and they buy what they hope it will be doing for them, whether it's better skin or giving them more confidence or a sense of control, right? Now, we have neuroscience backing this up. Gerald Zoltzman, a Harvard professor, he found that 95% of purchasing decisions are made in the subconscious mind, which means that before our rational brain even gets a say, the emotional side of our brain has already made a decision whether we'll be getting something or not. So, what does that mean for you as a copywriter? It means that you're not just writing for someone who's carefully weighing the pros and cons. You're writing for someone who's using their emotions to move across their decisions, and sometimes this happens without them even realizing it. So this is why copy needs to use really effective emotional shortcuts. Let's take a look at them. Now, these psychological levers, they're actually mental and emotional pathways that kind of bypass that logical friction that we have, that should I buy this, I don't really think it's going to serve me in long term, or perhaps I'm spending too much on it, I could just wait for a little while. All of these friction logical ideas, your emotions tend to bypass them. So even copy uses these levers to kind of surpass all of that and go straight to the gut of your customer. Now here's an example. Instead of saying something like this pillowcase uses memory foam and remembers your sleeping patterns, right? Although it's good, it's given benefits, it's also talked about a feature. You can say something like sleep like you haven't slept in years, or wake up pain-free and happy, right? So like the first line is giving features, but the second option is kind of giving an outcome that's tied to feelings, right? People who are not able to sleep well, who haven't had like a good night's sleep in years, they're going to be able to sleep really well. You're promising that to them. That's the outcome you're promising. So when we write copy, we need to speak to what I like to call the emotional undercurrent of a reader, right? And we do that by pulling these 4 emotions. So first of all, you've got fear. This is about risk, uncertainty, anxiety, right? A lot of insurance or security, CCTV type of ads actually tap into this. Even something like, not even like insurance, but stuff like low stock or sale ending soon, they kind of trigger this fear of missing out, right? Then you've got desire. Now these are aspirational wants, right? Stuff like beauty, status, love, freedom. brands like Chanel or Apple, they kind of sell a feeling, not a product, and desire is what they tap into, right? Because they kind of tell you that, okay, this is going to make you feel confident or attractive or in control, right? All of that. Then it's identity. Now, sometimes people want to buy things that reflect who they are, or maybe who they want to be perceived as, right? And over here, think of this motorcycle line called Harley Davidson, right? You've all obviously heard about it. What is the first thing that comes into your mind when I say this brand? Something powerful, a really muscular guy, or those biker gang dudes, right? Or perhaps someone who's like a rebel, someone who's very confident. So over here, when I say this brand, the identity it's formed, the identity it's making you get, right? It's not just limited to a motorcycle. It's about creating an identity of confidence, of rebellion, all of that. Then you've also got reward. Now, this is about using your brain's dopamine hit. What gives you a dopamine rush or a serotonin rush? These are feel-good hormones in your body, right? Dopamine and serotonin. They are produced when you feel really happy, really excited. So, what is something that kind of makes you get a hit of those hormones, right? A copy is going to use that, and you're going to kind of create this feeling of ease or comfort or joy. And that is why sometimes when you kind of download an app that is saving you time, or maybe there's a certain snack you really like and you eat it and you instantly feel really happy, it's because those are giving you dopamine hits. So you can kind of factor into that and write a copy using that dopamine hit feeling as well. Now let's talk about one of the most psychologically clever ad written, which kind of uses these psychological levers, right? This is the campaign by Snickers. You've seen it everywhere. It says, "You're not you when you're hungry." So you notice what this line does not do? It's not talking about the peanuts or the caramel or the taste of chocolates. It's not saying stuff like delicious or satisfying. Instead, it's making a direct emotional hit. Whereas this campaign is a subtle identity threat, right? It says hunger changes who you are. You're cranky, you're not yourself, you lose your social likability, your composure. Basically, you become someone that people do not want to deal with when you're really hungry. It happens to everyone, right? So, what does this ad do next? It offers reward and relief, right? That with one Snickers bar, you'll return to your original self, a less cranky version of yourself. It's kind of promising an emotional transformation, not just a regular sugar fix, right? So, what emotions is this tapping into? One, fear, right? The fear of not being in control of who you are just because you're really hungry. Second, desire. The desire to kind of maintain your identity, your social harmony, and not turn into this irritable person. The reward, which is like a quick fix that's kind of restoring your emotional balance, right? That's the reward you're getting. Plus, I mean, it's super tasty as well, so that's the reward as well. But over here, it's not limited to hunger. It's limited to, it's kind of talking about the psychology of self, right? And that's what a great copy does. It understands our invisible emotional battles and it steps into it as a solution. Because feeling cranky when you're hungry, or being very irritated, or not being able to stay calm, it's when you're hungry, it's like something that every person faces. There's not a single person on earth who will not get irritated when they're super hungry, right? And this over there is coming as a fix. It's tapping into that thing, that emotional, biological stuff that every human goes through. Now let's talk about cognitive biases. Now, before we jump into all the types of cognitive biases, here's something we need to admit, which is that as humans, we are predictably irrational. We like to think that we're making logical decisions, but more than often, it's the little nudges. So, stuff like urgency, social proof, expert opinions, these are things that are actually pushing us to click and buy the stuff. You must be thinking that it's completely your decision, but to be honest, a lot of factors are actually manipulating you to buy something. And all of those factors require copywriting. That is where copywriting is working. Why? Because they're pushing you to do an action. So, these psychological shortcuts that I'll be telling you about, they're kind of moving into how our brains as humans work, right? how we can bypass logic and go straight for instinct at times. And great copywriters use these not only to manipulate their audience but actually guide them to an end result, to an outcome as well, because it's making decisions easier, it's reducing friction, and it's speaking to people the way that their brains actually operate, right? So we're going to walk through these few slides. I think there are 3 or 4 cognitive based biases that we'll be talking about, and these are going to help you turn an ordinary nice sounding copy. You could have like a good copy, right, that's written well, because by now you know how to write your sentences, how to structure your story in a way, or how to use a certain framework to get a really good copy. But it's going to turn that really good copy into something that's so impossible to ignore that people are going to not just decide that okay, I'll buy this thing someday, they're going to buy it right there and then, right? So first, let's talk about the oldest tricks in the books, which is scarcity. Why does it work so well? Because as humans, we are wired to want things that we cannot easily have. Scarcity creates urgency. It's instantly raising the perceived value of an offer, and most importantly, it's triggering the feeling of FOMO. FOMO is fear of missing out, right? So why does this work so well? Because at our core, as human beings, we are still working off on survival instincts. It's rare, but it's important, because if something is rare, we automatically think that it's going to be important. If everyone wants it, you want it a little more. And if something is going out of stock, you're probably going to be like buying 1 or at least 2 of those things right there and then, right? Even during COVID, you must have seen how people were piling rations and everything, or at time of war, people kind of tend to hoard onto a lot of stuff. Why? Because those are your survival instincts, and you can use that into creating a scarcity bias in your copy as well. Now, let me give you an example that had both scarcity and storytelling, a little bit of storytelling, nailed down. Starbucks ran a buy one get one free campaign, but it was only on May 7th, and this happened this year only. So the hook was, offer so good anyone can be your +1, right? And on the cups you see names printed like Akbar and Anarkali. Now that sounds weird. Why? Because Akbar literally ordered Anarkali to be rigged alive, right? So these two can never be seen sipping caramel lattes together, because that just sounds weird, the idea of them sitting and having a cup of coffee, right? So this message kind of hits you like a wink, that this offer is so good that even if you hate someone, you're going to sit and have coffee with them because you're getting one for free, right? It's creating that buzz, that urgency, and a shareable humor all in one deadline, all in one line. And there's also a deadline of a certain date that is only applicable on one day, which is creating the sense of scarcity. But it's not creating that sense of limited time only, because that is something that's very common, right? You've given a very specific time, a specific date, and a very specific offer. There aren't multiple offers piling up. You just said one thing and one day. So it's going to make more people act on that, right? Next, let's talk about authority bias. Now, as humans, we're more likely to trust someone who looks like they know what they're talking about. If someone's wearing a lab coat and talking about a product, you're immediately going to believe them. If they have a fancy title or like a very good job description as their title, you're going to believe them even more, right? So it's because we trust perceived experts. Perceived experts mean that experts in areas that we don't fully understand, and those people who are considered experts, right? They could not be experts. They could not be people who are good in their field. Maybe it could be an actor saying stuff like that. But as long as it's making you feel that an expert is kind of advising you to use something, you're immediately going to want to use it, right? So in stuff like medicine, skincare, finance, tech, all of these areas that you might not fully understand, you're more likely to look at the advice of an expert and act accordingly. Why? Because authority equals credibility, and credibility kind of lowers our decision anxiety, right? We feel safer handing over our money to someone who looks qualified, or someone who's already gotten the stamp of approval from geniuses, right? Here's an example. Sensodyne. You've seen this ad almost everywhere, not just in Sensodyne, you've even seen it on Colgate and stuff, right? But Sensodyne specifically uses number 1 dentist recommended. Colgate has 9 out of 10 dentists recommend, right? But over here, it's kind of talking about ranking that it's the most recommended toothpaste by dentists. Now, have you ever met this dentist? No. Do you know how many dentists were surveyed? Probably none. Probably one or two, or maybe not even them, right? But the moment you read this, your brain goes like, okay, cool. Dentists like it, so it must be right, right? This creates instant trust. There are no questions asked over there. And that's the power of using authority bias. It doesn't ask for logic, it just needs, a lab coat and a good line, to be honest. Next, let's talk about loss aversion. So, the psychological truth is that we as humans hate losing more than we hate winning. Let's say I tell you that you won 500 rupees. You feel good. Although it's a minimal amount, it's not a lot of money, you still feel nice that okay, I just got a certain amount of money for free. Now, what if I say you lost 500 rupees? Again, it was a minimal amount, but it's going to sting way more than the fact that you won it, even though the amount of money over there is the same. Over here, it's not about logic, it's about emotion, and emotion tends to drive action. So that's why a great copy doesn't just dangle the reward, it kind of frames inaction as a risk to the audience. So you're not just missing out. That's not what you're telling the audience. You're not saying, oh, you're missing out on this. You're telling them that they're losing something that they had or they almost had, right? So a perfect example of this is Spotify's premium email. They're not going to say stuff like, want to keep listening ad free. They're going to say stuff like, your premium ends soon, keep your music, right? It's simple, but it's smart. The words keep tells your brain that you're about to lose something, right? And suddenly you're not deciding whether you want to subscribe or not subscribe. You're trying not to give up the sense of listening to music without ads, or listening to whatever you want to. That feeling, you're not trying to lose onto that instead. So over here, loss aversion isn't pushy, it's more persuasive in that way, right? Because you're telling them that they already had something and they're losing on to it. So it's kind of nudging people with a sense of urgency that's very personal, that you had this thing, don't let it slip. That's what's happening. Now let's move to the last one. This is a very sneaky effect, the anchoring effect, right? When we're kind of trying to buy something, we don't calculate value. We compare the product, right? So the first product or the first price that we see, it's going to set the anchor in our mind. Everything after that, we're going to be comparing it with the first option, which means that if the first thing you see is expensive, everything else that you see after that is going to feel like a good deal, even if it's not. And who uses this the best? Apple. When you land on, let's say you go on the iPhone page, right? What's the first thing they show you when you kind of scroll after a couple of products? They're going to show you, let's say, an iPhone Pro Max, which is the big one, the bougie one, the most expensive option they have. And over there, it's in your head that, okay, this iPhone 16, it's pretty pricey. But after that, they're going to come up with you, they're going to show you the base model, right? And then you're going to think that, okay, even though this is pricey, it still feels reasonable. Because over here, your brain is not going to be like, do I really need to spend 70,000 on a phone? Instead of your brain asking you that, okay, should I be spending 80, 70,000? It's going to say, at least I don't have to spend 150, right? Like 1,50,000 on a phone, which was the first option. You compare the price of the second phone with the first phone. You see that, okay, a couple of features aren't there, but then you're going to be thinking that, okay, but I'm buying it at almost half the price. You compare, and then that first price kind of anchored in your mind, you compare it with the other products, and the other products made more sense, and you end up clicking on buy instead of actually going to another brand and checking out their prices as well, right? So it's about the first price and the first price placement or the first product placement over here. It's setting a bar, and then almost everything that's below it feels like a very good deal. So you can use that, whether you're writing a landing page, right? Whether you're kind of creating an ad. Normally this works really well in landing pages. So if you kind of look at all the examples we did, scarcity bias was really good for social media ads. Authority bias is really good for billboards, right? Then the loss aversion thing we did, it worked well with emails, and anchoring effects worked well with landing pages. So you kind of covered all copy. all types of copy that we've done, the major types, and the different psychologies that you can use with them. And all these cognitive biases are actually going to help you write better for any kind of copy or any type of platform that you want to write for. Now let's talk about the power of language. So, you're working with words. As a copywriter, words is all you do, right? But because of this, you also know that words aren't just limited to information. You can use them as emotional cues. You know that as a copywriter, you're not just writing to explain something, you're writing to move people, right? So using the right words can help your lines stick in the head of your audience, tug at their feeling, or even change how they perceive something, and almost instantly, right? But that is something that you obviously know, right? That language is important, words are important. But how does psychology play a role in this? Psychology is going to help you understand what kind of words can be used in what kind of ads and what kind of an effect do they have, right? So let's kind of look at the first type or the first category, which is sensory words. These are the words that don't describe something, they kind of ignite your senses. They tap into senses like touch, taste, sound, sight, and all of that, and they make your audience feel something physically. Even though your product could be intangible at that moment, but it still feels very physical to them, right? And the reason it matters is because your brain does not just read sensory words and go on, it reacts to them like it's actually experiencing those sensations. And this has actually been studied shown in a lot of studies, right? So instead of like giving you the statistics, let's just perform this example on you. This ad for Doritos, it says blame it on the crunch. As soon as you hear the word crunch, I'm pretty sure in your brain you could also hear that loud, satisfying snap, right? So Doritos used it like that to show how crunchy their products are. Even for KFC, when you say stuff like finger licking good, you can almost taste the salt and the grease of their food on your fingers. So that's how it works. And honestly, it's not just limited to food products or the sense of taste. When I say, think of Ford Mustang, right? And the ad says the unmistakable rumble of the Ford Mustang, something like that. So over here, sound is the identity. As soon as I said the word rumble, right? And you already knew the ad I was talking about, and then I say the word rumble, that gritty, iconic engine growl of that car, it's automatically in your brain. You can automatically hear it, and all of a sudden you can kind of visualize the car as well without having any picture. I said a line, there's no photo floating, there's no picture floating around over here or any noise of a car that you can hear. But in your brain, you were automatically able to see what the car looked like and see what the sound it makes. Why? Because we used sensory words over there. Next are power words. Now, these are emotionally charged, high impact words that instantly grab attention and they stir something in the feed over there. The best part is that such ads, when you're using power words, they're not long, they're not fancy, but they pack a punch in one go. Take Amazon for example. It says free same day delivery. The word free, as soon as you read it, your brain kind of lights up, right? And the word same day, right, it shows that there's this like urgency and there's this feeling of speed and convenience, all of that, and all of this can be seen in like a 4-word, 5-word copy, right? Or even if you're looking at Apple, it says beautiful, durable design, built to last, right? So it's a simple, bold copy, but it's giving you instant confidence in the product. There's no fluff, there's just trust in this, that's it. And power words over here are working well because they trigger emotion, they trigger curiosity or excitement, safety, even maybe a little bit of FOMO at times, right? So they turn plain sentences into sentences that kind of demand your attention right there and then. And when they're used in the right way, they make your copy feel really sharp, tight, and impossible to skim by, right? Next, I've mentioned this so many times, we've talked about this so many times, but it's only right if we kind of mention it over here as well, which is that no one wants to read a copy that looks like it was written by ChatGPT or a corporate robot. And this is where conversational tone comes in. It's like, when you use conversational tone in your copy, your audience is going to feel like they're actually being told something by their friend or someone they're familiar to. And how you do that is using casual, witty, and real sentences, real examples. Drop the jargon, skip the salesy fluff, all of that, and just talk, right? Let's look at this example for Oatly. It says wow no cow, right? So it's fun, it's weird, and sounds nothing like traditional meat ads, right? Even if you look at this ad by Dollar Shave Club, the way they've written the ad, or the line they've used over here, they've used a cuss word, although they've kind of bleeped it out, because obviously you're not allowed to kind of write any profanities right there in your copy. It isn't allowed. You cannot write a profanity like that. But if you want to use it in your copy, you can kind of use asterisk to kind of blur out a little bit of it so that people get the idea, but you're not directly writing it, right? So over here again, they've said our blades are effing great, right? Again, there's zero filter, there's total confidence. You instantly know the brand's personality, that it's bold, it's cheeky, it's unapologetic. So why do these things work? Because a conversational tone builds trust. It feels human. It makes a brand sound like a friend, not a billboard, right? Um, when your copy feels like a friend, your audience is going to be more likely to read it, remember it, and maybe even act on it, right? Next is my favorite part, which is using a sense of surprise or unexpected twists in your ad. And honestly, these ads are some of the best ads whenever you use these, but they have to be used in the right manner. The thing is that we are so used to seeing ads everywhere, on your phone, in the newspaper, on the TV, on YouTube, on billboards, right? We're so used to it that we kind of tend to tune them out, and our brain goes on autopilot mode, right? So even if there's a very good copy written, you'll see it would be like, yeah, okay, but it's not going to make you stop and wonder, even if it's a really good copy. Why? Because again, we're tuning it out, it's everywhere. But the moment that something totally unexpected shows up, your autopilot mode breaks. We look twice and we end up remembering that thing, which is why subverting expectations works really well. So, how are you doing it? You're kind of flipping the script, right? Or you're giving a shock factor that's enough to be unforgettable, but it's also very understandable by the audience. Let's take a look at this ad. You must have seen this ad where Burger King kind of put a picture of a very moldy Whopper in their ad. It's showing a rotting, fuzzy green burger with the line, "The beauty of no artificial preservatives." The photo is totally unappetizing. I mean, it's not going to make you want to eat a burger, right? But why would a burger brand do that? Why is it going to make an ad that's so unappetizing? That is the twist. But at the same time, it's going to be brilliant. Why? Because although no one expects a food brand to show mold, it's a very bold move, and it's going to force you to think what to expect from fast food, which is no addition of preservatives. If there was a preservative added into it, artificial or not artificial, this burger would not have mold on it. But because Burger King uses no preservatives, they're showing that okay, their burgers do catch mold, but that means you can have them fresh, right? And it's not harming your health. The same goes for Liquid Death. This can, it looks like energy drinks, to be honest, right? And it's got a hardcore name, there's metallic typography, but the surprise is that it's just water. And the whole brand over here thrives on using unexpected twists, right? And it turns plain hydration into something that seems very punk and heavy metal. And that's the power of unexpected. It's grabbing attention and it's sticking because your brain did not see that thing coming. These two ads will stick with you. Why? Because you were like, what? That's literally what it makes you feel. As long as there's a big question mark on your audience's mind, and not of clarity, not of the lack of clarity, but of why, right? That is where you've done a good job, because you could be using unexpected twist, but if it's not clear, you've not done the right thing. But when you kind of use the twist with clarity, your ad is going to stick really well. Okay, so you must have heard about this phrase that facts tell, stories sell. It's overused in copywriting, whether you've read blogs about copywriting or whatever. Even we've mentioned it a couple of times that facts are only going to inform your audience, but creating a good story is going to help you tap into the desire of your audience, right? It's true, it's not at all overhyped, but what is the science behind this? That's what we're going to be talking about right now, right? For that, we need to understand how stories work on the brain. Now, the thing is that stories kind of activate your mirror neurons, right? Which is that we are going to mirror the feeling of the character in a certain ad, right? What the character feels, we're going to feel that as well. It happens in movies, it happens when you're watching a show, it happens when you're reading a book. It's very common. Due to that, stories tend to like light up that emotion and memory part of your brain, which makes them 22 times more memorable than facts alone. And that's from a Stanford researcher who kind of figured out this statistic. Most importantly, stories lower resistance. They bypass our mental filters. When we're entertained, we're open to stuff. We're not analyzing anything, we're not defending anything, we're just into it. And due to that, it makes it more easier for you to exploit or manipulate your audience using their emotions and using their vulnerability at that time to kind of make them buy something, right? So we'll take on examples over here. First, let's take the example of Dove's Real Beauty sketches. So this was a campaign where first a woman would sit and describe what her face looks like to a sketch artist, and after that a stranger would look at the said woman and then describe that face to a sketch artist, and we'd see the two versions of the same person's face, right? So the stranger's versions were always softer and more beautiful. So this ad kind of went into a very big emotion felt by many women, which is the emotion of feeling insecure, right? According to statistics, only 4% of women believe that they're beautiful. That means 96% women don't consider themselves beautiful, but when seen from a stranger's perspective, they are very beautiful. So this kind of used that emotion and that psychological trick to create a campaign, and it worked really well. It went viral, it made more people connect with the brand, and it helped generate a lot of revenue. Another ad was this ad by Google India, which was the reunion ad. So I can't play the ad over here because it's a 6-minute ad. So you can kind of search it after this lecture and see it. But basically, the basic premise of this ad is that two childhood friends, they were separated when the partition happened, and then they were reunited due to a granddaughter's Google search. The grandfather shows her a picture that this is a friend I used to have. The girl goes on Google, she searches for the person, and eventually she helps the grandfather meet his childhood friend who happened to live in Pakistan, right? So this ad, it wasn't just emotional, it did not just make people connect with Google. It was such a powerful ad, and the storytelling in this ad was so powerful that the governments of India and Pakistan actually eased the visa process between these two countries after this ad was aired. So over here, Google was not just working as a search engine. As it is, people don't need an advertisement to use Google. It's kind of by default the search engine of every phone or every laptop, right? But over here, it was making people connect with their brand a little more. It was creating a brand image, right? And it created such a good image via storytelling that it kind of made itself a household name, and it kind of generated a lot of reach for the social media campaigns they had, or even the billboard campaigns they had. So over here, this ad, like these two ads, Dove and Google, they're not shouting features over there. They're using storytelling and psychological storytelling. One is using the feeling of insecurity that women feel. The second is using this feeling of wanting to help your grandparents, or the feeling of nostalgia, right? To kind of create a space for their brand in your mind, right? So it's kind of connecting and staying with you long after the ad is over. Whether it's a product like Dove, whether it's a service like Google, right? Storytelling can be used to create space for your brand's name. Sometimes it's not just like social ad campaigns, like this was really social, but even if there's a product you want to sell, you can kind of factor into such emotions, whether you want to make people laugh, make people feel emotional. Pick out any emotion and kind of tell a story that kind of triggers that emotion of your audience, and you'll create an ad that sticks with your audience throughout. Now, here is another thing. Some of the greatest brands understand that people do not just buy product, they buy convenience, or a certain transformation or an outcome, which we've talked about a couple of times. And how do they do that? They use product psychology, right? Like, no one wakes up in the morning really excited to go out and buy toothpaste or milk or whatever, right? what they want to do is that they want to kind of ease their hunger, have fresh breath, all of that, right? So your product over here is just a vehicle. Your copy is helping you sell the emotional outcome, but again, what is going to help you do that correctly? Understanding the psychology. So take Apple for example. You're not just buying a phone. You're buying something like creativity or simplicity, or maybe just like the sense of being ahead of other Android users or whatever. Or if you're talking about IKEA, it's not just limited to furniture. It's giving you that sense of confidence and sustainability, that sense of confidence or self-sufficiency that you built a certain furniture on your own, right? That you assembled it together. It's affordable, it's practical, and you take pride of it being in your own space. So people kind of want to see themselves reflected in a product, and a great copy is going to describe exactly that. It's going to paint a picture of who you will become after you've had it, right? And over there, you're going to use a little bit of product psychology along with the outcome psychology of the product. So you can do this by, the first theory over here is the jobs to be done theory, right? The idea is simple, that people do not buy products, they hire products in a way to do a certain job, whether it's emotional, social, or practical. Instead of asking yourself, what are you selling in your copy? Ask yourself, what are people really buying this for? Why are people buying this, right? Which obviously is a big chunk of your product and audience research, like we talked about in the very beginning. So take Uber for example. Uber is not just a transport. It's convenience. It's kind of convenience. It's giving you control, and you don't have to deal with shady taxis or those dramatic auto fights over the bills again, right? Or even if we're talking about Starbucks, I mean, sure, it's coffee, everyone knows that, but it's also a third place. It's not home, it's not work, it's a third place where you feel human and safe and seen, and you can just work over there at a corner table with the Wi-Fi and the sense of belonging, right? Which is not something that's found at home because you're too comfortable, or work where it's too rigid. So when you're writing copy, go deeper. Ask yourself, what emotional social job is your product doing that could be incorporated into your copy, because that's going to go way beyond your features list. Next is talking about the perceived value. So again, this is not about what something is, it's about what it feels worth, right? Let's say you have two bottles of water. One is for 20 rupees, the other one was for 120 rupees. There's the same liquid inside, but your perspectives or your perceptions are going to be wildly different about both of those water bottles. Why? Because it's the difference in framing them, the difference of packaging, or the difference of like the status symbol that they carry, right? So whether you're having like a 20 rupee Bisleri bottle or those like black water bottles that are worth 100, 200, what is going to make you feel more high status and like more cool? Obviously the latter, even though both of them are reducing your thirst, but you feel like if you're paying more for something, it's more premium and you can kind of show it off. So there's that, right? And honestly, Apple does this flawlessly. It's not just limited to technology, although that's what Apple is, it's technology, there's nothing beyond that, right? But it's kind of showing itself as something that's very premium, and that's why people feel that using Apple products, or you having an iPhone, owning an iPhone or a MacBook, it's kind of a status symbol, right? Whereas it's not. It's doing the same job as any other phone would do, as any other laptop would do, but they've created a brand circling around the feeling of premium, right? Next you have Fiji water. Again, it's just water, but they kind of create a story revolving around how rare it is and exotic it is, and the water, the place where it's sourced from, it's untouched by man. Then again, this makes it not limited to hydration. It again becomes a status symbol, or this feeling of having very clear water or clean water, or something very natural. Although if it's untouched by man, how did they source that water? Obviously, but they're using this in their storytelling to kind of create that sense of that feeling in you, so that you can kind of reach out to the brand and buy their water instead. So how are you going to boost this perceived value in your copy? You're going to frame your product around the qualities of scarcity, innovation, or even maybe if you're using a good story, right? Because people do not pay for a product for what it is, They pay for what they feel its worth is. So you kind of use that to your benefit. Lastly, you have category entry points. Now, this is something that's super important when you're creating an ad. Never ever forget this. This is going to help you create the best ads of all time, and trust me when I say that, right? Um, there are certain moments or there are certain mindsets where your brand should pop up into someone's brain. Like at the right time, at the right place, during the right emotion. So think of this. When someone says that I just finished a workout, what is the thing that comes to your mind? What product would come to your mind? For me, it would be Gatorade. Why? Not because of the ingredients that they have, but because they've claimed that moment. They've kind of shown themselves as an after workout energy drink, right? Same with Dettol. The moment you're feeling sick, or if there's a pandemic, if someone's sneezing, or if someone's gotten hurt, the first thing that you think of is Dettol, right? Even if we look at M&M's over here, melts in your mouth, not in your hands. That's like a tagline that they used. Why? Because normally when you're eating chocolate and you're holding it in your hand without a wrapper, your hands tend to get a little sticky, a little messy. But M&M's don't do that. So they kind of show themselves as a very on the go, clean, sharing snack. So people, if like they're traveling or something, they're going to be more inclined towards buying something that's less messy. So how are you going to use all these category entry points in your copy? You're going to ask yourself questions like what emotional or situational triggers connect our product or our service to a customer? When do people need us most in their life? What is some situation that's happening in their life in that very exact moment due to which they kind of anchor our product to their life, right? So because your product or your service owns that moment, you automatically own their memory of a situation, and you can use your copy based on that situation to kind of create a good ad which shows up at the right time, and your brain goes like, okay, I definitely need this at certain situations like this, right? So that's how you're going to use stuff like category entry points and perceived values and jobs to be done queries to kind of tie psychology to your product. Now that we've understood all of this, it's time to create a mock ad. Our base product for today is noise cancelling headphones, and we're going to be using two types of ads or two types of psychological triggers to kind of create our copy, right? So first I'm going to be using that unexpected twist category flip thing where we were kind of looking at ads by Burger King and all of that, right? And second we'll be using storytelling and memory recall, right? So for the second one, we'll actually be creating a video ad script like the one we did last time, so that we can kind of recap on how to create a video script and also kind of use a little bit of storytelling and emotions into that, right? So first of all, let's go with the first type, which is using unexpected twist or humor with a category flip. So over here, I'm going to be thinking about something like, we're talking about headphones, right? So the idea I have in mind right now is that imagine you're sitting at a dining, right, where everyone is super loud and they're kind of just talking and being really loud, and you just want to have your meal in peace. But again, you cannot go away from them. So you can kind of think of using your headphones as a good break from all of that dinner table noise, right? So I am going to be, we can't really create or copy paste a picture over here. So let's kind of ask AI to create a picture. So I'm just going to be putting in a prompt for my visual first, right? So I'm going to be using something like create a picture of we're going to have a dining table atmosphere, people eating, and them being loud while eating a lot and laughing and talking really loudly, eating like animals, all of that, and a person on the side smiling through the noise because they have headphones on. Okay, so while that's being created, let's kind of write our copy. So we're kind of showing how this person is kind of surrounded by sound. And you know how many TVs and speakers, I mean, speakers are the exact opposite of headphones, right? So that's kind of an unexpected twist. If we talk about something like surround sound, they kind of use this terminology a lot, that these speakers have surround sound systems, or this TV has surround sound system. So we can kind of say surround sound not at the dinner table. There. So something like that kind of makes sense, that headphones are the exact opposite of surround sound. So we've done a little bit of category flip over there, and we've kind of added humor with the dinner table gag, right? So okay, great. Our image is ready as well. I'll just drag it here. There. Is it visible? Yes, there we go. So these are some things we can use. Now, obviously, your copy won't be looking like this. You'll have a graphic designer helping. Maybe you can even turn this into a video ad, right? But that's kind of the basic premise or the base of what your copy is going to be. That people are being really loud and you don't want that surround sound feeling. So you've got that. So I'm pretty sure you get the idea of this ad by now. Next, we're going to be using storytelling. So we're going to be tapping into, let's use a category entry point over here. Where can headphones be used? We can either use them at workplaces, or we can use them in class, in the library, in cafes. But that's something very basic. That's not that's not a very big pain point for your audience. So I think we could use something like, if you've ever been on a flight or a train, you must know that when there's turbulence, or even normally, some people tend to be really loud on a flight, right? So we could kind of factor that as a psychological aspect over here, that you want a flight and you want to be well relaxed, and perhaps certain situations don't let you be relaxed in a plane. So we want to create that sense of rest and wellness due to headphones, right? In a very noisy atmosphere. So again, we're kind of using a lot of satire over here, or maybe we could just, it's a lot of opposing visuals, right? So I won't be creating a voiceover per se, because again, that's going to take a lot of time. But let's just write scenes that we'll be seeing, right? So we could show a scene of plane turbulence. What's the most annoying sound on the plane? A baby crying. So we could show a baby crying, the loud noise of that. People being loud per se, like if you've seen certain memes or reels, there are these people categorized as Karens, people who tend to have an issue with everything, who are racist, or they just want to fight, right, on petty issues. So we can show that, like people being loud. These people are people like Karens, right? What else? We could also show that this flight is going to take ages. So something like, a timer over there which says 8 hours. So that's like how long a flight is. And imagine being in a flight with all of that noise. It's going to be irritating, right? So it's going to create this sense of anxiety and suffocation, right? So we write that on. Now that's your basic premise. So we're going to be able to tap into the feeling of anxiety and suffocation, even though your audience is sitting on a couch and not necessarily in a plane, but it's going to be relatable to them via those sensory visuals that we show, right? Now, to combat all of that, to kind of go in a very opposite direction, we can show a person with their, let's use a different color, their headphones on, and they're smiling, right? And they sleep through all of this noise. They wake up well rested when the plane lands, while others look like a mess. So this is kind of what your ad is going to look like. You don't even need a tagline, you don't need any words. Just like have a good product placement as soon as the screen goes blank, and that will be your ad. You've used storytelling, you've used the mirror neuron technique, where you're going to make people kind of feel what a person is feeling. First they'll be feeling that sense of anxiety and loud noises and everything, but as soon as your character puts on their headphones and there's silence all around, your people can see that as well, right? And they can feel it, and it's obviously using emotional recall as well. So that is how you're going to use psychology into creating a copy based on the things that you know already. You knew that you're supposed to use concise words, no jargon, conversational tones. You knew how you can use certain emotions to create copy. But which emotion is the right emotion? What is the technique of using that emotion in a copy? That is where psychology comes into play. And that's basically what you've understood today. So now that you've gone through all of these techniques, it is now your turn. So for today, you're going to be creating an ad on your product, which is a Kindle Paperwhite. which is an e-reader. People can read on this, so you can use stuff like people want to read books but the font of the book is too small, right? They can increase the font on a Kindle. Maybe you love reading books and you're like a very fast reader, and you can like read 2 books in a day, and you're going for a trip that's around a week long and you want books. So you won't be packing a suitcase filled with books. You can just take a Kindle on the go. Or maybe you like reading at night but you don't want to keep the lights on, or you don't want to use a flashlight while you're reading a book. A Kindle is going to work really well over there as well. So you can use these psychological aspects or these requirements of your audience and see what pain points they have, what emotions they have, what cognitive bias you can use if you want to use that, what product psychology you can use. If there's storytelling psychology you want to use, you can use that as well, and create a really good ad. You could create a video ad. If you want to shoot a video, that's up to you, you can do that. If you want to write a script, that's also cool. If you want to create a billboard ad, if you want to create a single line copy, if you want to create a PR newsletter email kind of thing, anything, go with any format of copywriting: video, script, ad, social media, emails, landing page, if you want to, anything that you want to try out, but use psychology into that. And also kind of write a little note along with your assignment when you submit it to show what psychological factors you took into pursuit over there. With that, it's a wrap for today, and you've understood what psychology is, why it matters in copywriting, what cognitive biases are, what power words you can use, what language you can use that sticks, right? What are some good storytelling techniques? What are some good product placement techniques? What are some good category entry points? All of that. So I think you're well versed enough to go create a very good assignment. I'm pretty sure of it. And remember, there's a questionnaire at the end of this lecture, so be sure to fill that out and send in your assignments before the deadline. That's it for today. Until next time.